That's a service position.
Why, thank you. I'm Candy, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Candy.
My sobriety date is 1/13/88, and my home group is the Edmonds group. And, sorry, could you pass this? And Lara asked me to speak a few months ago, and I said, yeah, because I was told never to turn down a service position, a request. But the way I have learned to deal with things in sobriety and before is I make the plans and then I forget about them.
Yes.
It's like a vacation. You know, I make the reservation and then I forget about them until a couple weeks before. And so here we are. Not I did not come from a family that had alcohol running through the household. However, I came from a family that had a lot of dysfunction and a lot of controlling issues and a lot of resentments going on. My parents owned a department store in small town America, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I was the fifth of 5 kids, and I was kind of not planned. And my mom was tired and she was resentful because my dad was involved with his business and business meetings and this guy's club and Kiwanis and Chamber of Commerce, and she got the brunt of it, and she got the brunt of the discipline also. And I think that I was born marching to a different drummer than the rest of my family. Because for whatever reason, I'm going to mention this, but I haven't really thought about it. But I had an ulcer when I was 7 years old. And it was because I couldn't live up to the standards that my parents put on me, or my mom put on me. I should say my dad was kind of the, oh, how you doing, honey? I was daddy's little girl until I wasn't, until I was in trouble. And mom had her fill of me. But I was the fatso, brace face, and 4 eyes. That was my nicknames growing up. And I was also the merchant's daughter who could get anything she wanted. That was what I heard from people. Whether that was true or not, because my mom made my clothes, and I'm not making excuses because they did exactly what I understand in sobriety, and I've done a lot of work around this. They did exactly what they knew with the tools that they had. However, growing up during that, I felt unseen, unheard, compared to my siblings. Why can't you just be like Dick, Jerry, Dave, Anita, Candy? Or Dick, that was I thought that was my name for a long time. Dick, Jerry, Dave, Anita, Candy. Because that's how I got called to do. Well, my dad started having a men's night of men over to play poker once in a while, and he would take a turn with these men. And so there started to be a little bit of booze in the house, way up high, but somewhere along the line, they got Mogan David wine. And I don't even remember why or what, but I was getting into junior high, and we were bused to a different town. And I thought, I just wanted to be liked. I just wanted to be one of the popular kids. I was just never enough, left out of things. So I decided to get one of their pill bottles, my parents' pill bottles, out of the garbage and fill it up with Mogan David wine and take it on the school bus and pass it around. Mm. I didn't have any, but I passed it around because that would make me cool. Well, guess what? It got back to parents and got back to my parents. And, it was just one more thing, attention getting, that I was trying to work out. I started dating a guy when I was 14, and I remember this was the Midwest, so the cool beer was Coors. And he brought a 6-pack of Coors and I drank 4 of them. First time officially drinking. And we were out on a date. And I got home and I got sick. And I remember the first thing is my mom heard me, eagle ear. And she came in and the first thing I said was, I only had one. So I was drinking and lying and cheating and stealing, from the beginning. But what I also found it was something that they could not control, that they could not influence, force me, squeeze me to control of what I did. And so life was happening. And I also found during that time that I loved the feeling of living on the edge, just almost getting in trouble, almost that it would have to be the police, but that I'd pull back. So that I always had this, we talk about the 2 angels, the dark angel and the light angel on our shoulders. Well, I felt that back then. It was like, I really, really, really want to get noticed and I want to be in trouble, but I don't want to be in so much trouble that I have to go to jail. Because it was a thrill. It was a thrill for me. I used to call myself a caged lion because that's what I felt. I felt like I was always just pacing and waiting and wanting. I found ways to get alcohol, but I was still on the outside looking in of the cool kids and of the cool group. And, small town America, one of the hardest things is always wanting to be on the other side on the greener side of the fence. And then I would get there and go, God, these people are mean. They're terrible to each other. And why do I want to be here? But yet I didn't want to give it up because I also didn't want to be out of the loop, because if you're out of the loop, you get talked about and you get made fun of and, the whole deal. So I've done a lot of work around this. Graduated from high school and decided I was going to move 60 miles away with 3 classmates, and they all had jobs. And I thought I had enough in savings to live a life for a while, and then I'd get a job. And so I promptly found myself in a bar and learned how to play pool and drink beer during the days. Looking back now, I understand how that was just not the right thing to do, especially with the 3 women I was with. Because what happened is I would get drunk and I would go out and I would find a stranger and bring them back to the apartment. And I put these other women's lives in danger, not thinking about it, because it's all about me. Because before I took alcohol, I was all into the ism, I, self, and me. Can't you see me? Can't you give me some validation? Can't something? Had a lot of regrets about that. But the bar I was going to, I finally got a job. And my first job was with the state parole office. And I was the first person parolees would see when their parole office, when the people from prison would bring them to meet with their parole officer. And they all looked like prospects to me. because I would go out and party and I would run into them. And it's like, well, let's party. I had these 2 lives going on. And I called it the 8 to 5, which was your business, because I'm working for you, and the 5 to 8, which is none of your business. And I lived by that for a lot of years. This bar I would go to, though, I got involved with a guy. I'm going to back up just a little bit. No, I'm not. I'll hit it when I hit it. I got involved with this guy who was 14 years older than me and had 3 kids that was living with him. And I thought I could help him because after all, because I was taught to be on my mom. One positive thing I got out of it is she was a hostess to people because we were small town merchants. New people came to town, came to church, blah, blah, blah. You welcome them, you give them whatever, a potluck or whatever, a casserole. And so I was taught the mindset of hostess with the mostest. And so I met this guy and he had 14, these 3 kids living with him, the oldest one was 4 years younger than me. But that didn't matter because I could help him. I was going to be the hostess. I was going to be the savior. And boy, was I in for 3 years of hell. And he was a full-blown alcoholic at that time. I don't believe I was at that time. However, I went along with whatever he said, whatever he demanded. He would do insurance scams and have someone come steal our stuff while we were out to lunch or out for supper, just so he could claim insurance, all kinds of things. And I worked and I supported him. And I don't know that was real naive. I love living on the edge, but I was very naive. And then it got to the point that the abuse started, and it was verbal abuse. And then it became physical abuse. And, I've had it done to me, but it got so bad that I started stuttering, and I didn't know why I stuttered. And it was because I was so afraid to look at him, because then I was accused of having an affair, or look at her because I was sneaking something. It was just awful. And then he beat me up one last time because my parents gave me a coat and a pair of boots for Christmas. And there was something that changed in me, something that snapped. And what I can remember is looking at this shotgun that was above the bed and thinking, you better kill me before I kill you. And the other part said, I've got to get out of here because the moment of insanity is going to be the end of me. But it also broke so much in me that the fear had no power over me anymore. His bullying, his threats had no power over me anymore. And I didn't care. I just didn't care. And so I said, we got evicted. I said, I'm leaving. I'm not going with you. I'm moving. And he saw the difference in me and he let me go. However, that was when the drinking really started. And I just, poured it in because I didn't like the feelings. I didn't want to deal with them. I didn't want to deal with what I'd allowed myself to be put through. And I started taking hostages and punishing the next people in line, the next guys in line, because I was never going to be treated like that again. I was angry, and I was deceitful, and I was wild, and I just didn't care. And then I met another guy, and we got married. And even though we both worked and owned a home, he worked shift work, which was convenient for my drinking, because he worked 8 to 4 or 4 to 12 or 12 to 8. And on the 4 to 12s, that was great because I'd get off work for a drink at 5. And at 1, he'd be calling me, going, where are you? Oh, I'll be home in a little bit. That went on for quite a few years. And I used to say that I didn't cheat on him. However, just because intercourse didn't happen didn't mean I didn't cheat. And, the denial that I had going into everything, And the ego and the pride of, you're not going to tell me what to do. And this is my life. And F you, blah, blah, blah. However, my drinking had really, I never lost a job or quit a job. And I always thought I wasn't an alcoholic because I'd never lost a job, never lost the home, never lost, the car. I didn't lose the outside things. What I understand today is I lost a whole lot of inside things, and I'll touch on that in a minute. But I happened to be home ill for a couple of days, and it was ill, not hangover ill. And my husband had got home from shift, and we didn't have any groceries, so I was feeling good enough to go to the grocery store. There was just something off about the day. And I drove off to the grocery store, and I came back within an hour and 15 minutes, and he had packed up and left me a note and said, gee, sorry, this didn't work out. I'll contact you later about a divorce. And I was beside myself because first of all, I thought it was all my fault because of my drinking. All my fault because of the guilt I was carrying of the things I had done while I was drinking, et cetera, et cetera. So what I did is I put myself in counseling, and one of the counselors offered to take me to my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And so I went and cried through the whole meeting because y'all were talking what I was feeling. And I remember they gave me a big book, and I took it home and read some of the stories in the back. I don't remember. It was all Greek. The first 164 are all Greek to me for a long time, but the stories mattered. And then my husband contacted me, and he had been gone 2 weeks. A side note here, he had gone on vacation with another woman, but that's just a part of the story. But I thought it was all my fault that he left. So he came back, and I shared with him that I had gone to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And he looked at me and he said, that disgusts me. It's like, okay, I'll never go again. But I took this book and I put it in with some business papers. Never thought about it again. Quit drinking for 6 months on my own. Because he said, that disgusts me, and why can't you just quit? It's just willpower. And so, but I put this book away. And so I was dry for 6 months. In the meantime, since he had done his thing, he decided to quit his job, and he was going to move to the West Coast. He had this dream. And he looked at me and he said, if you want to come, you can come. Well, of course, we're married. Why wouldn't I? So I quit my job. We sold our home. I did tell him at that time, I can't go through this again with you leaving. We came out here in July of 1987. It was agreed that I was going to stay home for a little bit and he was going to work. That didn't work out because he didn't really want to work. But all this time, in April of that year before we left, I said, I've been dry for 6 months, and it's my birthday, and I'd really like a glass of wine. He said, that's okay. You're doing good. You can. And I did. And I was off and running. And so I continued to drink. And until January 12th, 1988, I had gone off to work and came back to another note. Said, sorry, can't do this anymore. Now I'm 2,000 miles away from my home, from where I grew up. And I don't know what I'm going to do. But I will tell you, I got to back up real quickly. I was always looking for quick fixes outside of myself. And so I happened to go to a women's club 2 months prior to this to sign up. And it's you sign up now or you can't sign up. I don't know why I started unloading to her about this thing going on with my husband, and she 12-stepped me. She said, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And at that time, I think she had about 7 months. I don't have any idea. And she gave me her card. But I remember thinking, you've got a job and you're dressed up, because that was not my conception of an alcoholic. And she gave me her card, never thought more about it. Then when my husband left, I went to start looking for the title of his truck, found my Alcoholics Anonymous book, started reading the stories in the back, called this woman on a Sunday morning. She had already, this was a week or 5 days had passed. She had already gone out for the day, happened to come home to pick up something, heard my message, took me to my first AA meeting. And that's where the beginning happened. I know that was kind of long, but that was important because it's what I needed to share. I will tell you, though, that I showed up to the meetings. I made sure I had sponsors that were not available. I did everything you tell me not to do. I changed jobs. I moved, I changed jobs, I got in a new relationship. And I think there's a fourth one. All within the first year. Luckily, I survived that. I don't recommend that to anybody. 2 years sober. I got to tell myself, because remember the I, self, and me. That hasn't gone away. The ego hasn't gone away. Because I'm looking good now, I'm feeling good, I'm exercising, but we have the international convention. And I'm a greeter. And I'm down. I'd been down to the Kingdom, left after the comedian, or when all that happened with comedian. We all went back to the Sheraton. People were standing around, singing around the piano, having a great time. You know, you can imagine the whole lobby's packed with people. And for some reason, I ended up going up the escalator and looking down on the crowd. Aren't they great? Because remember, I'm the hostess with the mostest. And I see a wet drunk come in off the street. I didn't want that wet drunk bothering our guests. So I called security. I said, we have a drunk in the crowd. And they go, where? I said, that one right there. They said, okay, we'll go take care of it. You know, and I was just feeling like this. And then a gentleman, and I think he was from Australia, walked by in front of me, and he goes, what are you looking at? And I said, well, there's a wet drunk in the crowd. And he looked at me, he goes, kind of reminds you of us, doesn't it? And I went from this to this. Because that's exactly what I needed to hear. Exactly what I needed to hear. Because I hadn't been working the big book program. I had been showing up to meetings, finding new friends, socializing, but I hadn't been doing the work. 3 years sober. I was feeling pretty miserable. And I told a friend, because I got involved with a women's home group. And I got involved and I shared with one of them. I said, you know, if this is all there is, I don't know if I want to stick around. And she said, the best thing she could have said to me, she said, there's the door. You're welcome to leave. However, I was just taken through this workshop, the big book workshop, and we went through it line by line with a dictionary. And I'd like to share it with you. And it, you know, at the end of that, if you still want to go drink, there's still the door. And I took that as a dare. It's like, fine, I'm going to show you. I'll just do it and it won't work for me. And I've never left. At 10 years sober, I realized, you know, it did. I got involved in AA. I got involved in the work. I will tell you that they've rewritten that big book every time I pull it off my shelf because I see something new. But at 10 years sober, I'd done enough work that I started to have the promises. I could start to correlate and see where the promises were coming true in my life. And I realized that my first sexual experience at the age of 17 was a rape. And I never knew that. And I'm 40 years old when I realized, when I finally acknowledged this. I always thought that I deserved it, I caused it, I enticed it, whatever. It was my fault. And no, it was someone took advantage of me sexually that I had said no to. And it was not okay. But I never knew that. But this is where I understand now in the ninth step, where it's, we will not forget the past nor wish to shut the door on it. And we will see how our experience can benefit others, because someone else might hear me say that and acknowledge that it happened to them too. Through the years, I've raised 2 stepchildren. That was another thing, is I decided that I wasn't going to have children, and God laughed. And so I ended up meeting 2 men that had children, and they were both 2. So everything I didn't want to have the children for, like diapers and being fat and blah, 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 I skipped. And I have a 41-year-old daughter and a 27-year-old son. And I am very blessed today to have been able to do that. I've had my ups and downs in sobriety. I hit my 18, 19, 20 and had to relook at what is this all there is? Nobody needs me anymore. And luckily I listened to some great speakers that said, you get to dig deeper spiritually. And that's another thing, is I had a God in my life from those parents that was a punishing and damnation God. And today I have a God that loves me no matter what, laughs at me, says, come here, honey. Come here, let me give you a hug and let's walk. You got far away from me. Come on, let's go back. My God has no face. It's a golden aura blanket that wraps around me, which is exactly what I need, because if it had a face, I wouldn't want to change it. And I've learned what God shots are today, and aha moments. They are meant to be. I used to think it's like, oh, well, I just thought of them and I just got a letter from them. Isn't that a coincidence? No, those are aha moments. Those are exactly what they're meant to be. I've also learned to pray differently. I don't pray for the outcome. I pray for acceptance of what I get, rather than the outcome that I want. And that really helped me. And that came out of Came to Believe book. I tell you, these books are rewritten every time I pick them up, because I'm ready to see more. I've had sponsors that I've had to make monetary amends. I have a self-taught bookkeeper, accountant, and I would work for you and keep your books to a T, but I couldn't balance my own checkbook. I don't know if I couldn't or wouldn't. But then there was the petty cash. A nickel here, a quarter there, and I got to make amends for that. And I said, I don't know how much it was. And I had settled on $200, and I wrote this letter, but my sponsor said, if you don't mail that letter by Monday, you're going to add $25 for every day you don't get it mailed. I need that guidance, because I don't want to deal with the uncomfortable. And I am so grateful that I haven't picked up again. That doesn't mean I haven't wanted to. What I find today is I have to be really careful, or I will look for my addiction in other things like work. It has been eating when I was a child, growing up. Gambling, I don't want to waste my money. But, I have to be really tuned into what does God want? And what is it that is healthy for me today, that I can benefit from, and I can learn from and walk in the spirit of the life that I have today, the wonderful life I have today. I am okay with who I am. I have become the woman I always wanted to be and still improve on that. And I never thought that I would achieve that. And I'm very grateful for Lara to invite me today. And there's so much more that we'll have to sit and talk about. But that's my story. Thank you.
Thank you.